All right, hi everyone, it's great to be here. Back for round two to talk a little bit about some tips for getting a K award. And I think though the first thing I want to say, I think you probably hear all the time that when you're going to apply for NIH funding, I don't know how it works for others funding streams, but certainly NIH funding, that you want to reach out to the people at NIH, right? You want to reach out to the program officer so that they can help you navigate the application process and also be an advocate for you when your application gets scored and there's discussion around where to draw funding lines. You want them to know who you are and know what you're doing and be able to speak on your behalf in rooms where you aren't. So, on that note, this is a group of people that I now work with. There's been a lot of reshuffling with the changes in staffing at NIH. But this is my current group, and there's actually a late addition who handles HEAL Initiative training, who's not on here, Elizabeth Seipik. But here are a bunch of us. There's me, and there's Adam, and Clint, and Limmy. So we're all here, and certainly you can feel free to reach out to us at any time. If you're thinking about an NINDS-K award, the people on this slide to talk to would be myself or K Reza Izadeh, the first person next to me on the slide. K appropriately handles lots of K awards, and so we can be great resources and are happy to help with anything you guys might need in the process. So I think if there's anything that you could take home from this, it's the message that even though a lot is changing, there's a lot of uncertainty, we're still here. We were actually during that time earlier on after the change in administration when people weren't really communicating much from NIH. There was a K deadline that came up and I was like, no one's talking to us, but NINDS is still talking, where is everyone? So certainly reach out to us, and you're not bothering us, this is what we're hired and paid to do, so please reach out. I guess what I want to cover is just a little bit of general encouragement, a little bit of funding data around K and our K to R transition. Applying for funding, some things to think about with respect to the application itself, and also just a couple of useful odds and ends. And I just want to note, most of these views will be my own. The data are the data, policies are what they are, but I'm not here really representing necessarily NIH. I think I represent NINDS training very well, but not necessarily the views of all of NIH. All right, so generally I think even though things are uncertain, you're still in control of your career, right? And so don't forget that. I think I was just talking to Dan Blue in the back, and I've had this conversation I think a bunch of times in recent times where there's uncertainty about, am I going to be able to get funded? How am I going to be able to keep doing research? The research questions are not going to go away, right? Whether you're funded to do the work or not, it might take a little bit longer to get where you're trying to go, but do stay active, right? Keep doing things to build your skill set and to be able to strike when the iron is hot, when there is a funding source that is, hopefully easy to get. But also I think for folks that I often talk to people who are pursuing dual careers, and it's like you already are a full-grown professional on one side, and now you're pursuing this research career on the other, and maybe you're not an expert in that space. And I think it's important to remember that. Don't think that you need to know everything, and do ask the questions that you have, right? Nothing is gonna be deemed stupid. Like, get what you need because you know where you're trying to go. And I think this goes back to the mentorship thing, which I'll say again on the next slide. But you know where you're going, you know where you're trying to get better than anyone else, and you know what you need. So certainly do advocate for yourself and dismiss the myth that you have to know everything, because that's what learning is all about. And then I think we've talked a bit about mentorship. I'm going to talk about the mentoring plan that you have to write for a K award, but right now I'll just say, just a reminder that mentorship, we always harp on mentors and say, be good mentors, don't be tormentors or whatever we're always saying in NIH, but you have to, it's a partnership, right? So advocate for yourself again, make sure that you do what you need to do to get where you are trying to go, because no one else is going to take care of you better than you will. All right, so let's shift to a little bit of data around K awards, and these are going to be specific to NINDS. Just wanted to put here the applicant success rate, and now we can appreciate that we're in a different landscape. Things are a little bit different. As far as NINDS is concerned, I think the plan going forward is to continue to not have a pay line as we have not had actually, and to evaluate where we put our funding line in accordance with how much money we have. But that said, I think it's still important to note these are the success rates, and they're really high, right? We're looking at individuals that had K awards from NINDS between 2012 and 2023. that had MD, PhDs, or PhD and also, or just an MD, and the success rates are incredible, really, really high, right? And the K23 maybe is a little bit lower. I think those can be, that's the reason why you guys are here. There's a whole course to help you be able to write good patient-based research applications. But I think even though they're a little bit lower success rates, they're still, it's just really outstanding. So on days when things are rough, try to remember this. I think you don't want to be caught up in the space of like, what's the success rate, what's the success rate? You want to focus on writing the best application and getting, you know, that you can. But I think it is encouraging to see how successful people have been. Now, I think we often also get this question, what happens if I apply for a K award and I don't get it the first time? Should I just give up? What are the chances of getting funded with a resubmission? And so with K08s, these are K08s and K23s. These are, if you look at the top, we're looking at the score of the initial application. These all went to the NST1 study section that has been sort of the crown jewel, I think, of NINDS review that is now no longer as everything's moving to CSR. But if you look at the scores in the first column, 2140 at that study section was really, they were really good scores, right? These grants are gonna have a good shot at getting funded. Most of them probably would. 41 to 60, got some issues. 60 plus, you're getting into the triage zone. But if we look at this eventually awarded row, you can see that 89% of those who had these sort of high scoring grants, when they came back in for resubmission, got funded. 74% of those in sort of the mid-range, and then even if you have grant triage, right, you've got almost a 40% chance of getting funded if you come back in. So I think the message here really is to persist. Okay, so a little more data about what happens when you're finished with your K and it's time to move on to an R01. Or you just go really finish with your K and move to R. So here we just have just a summary of K08 and K23s from NINDS that ended between 2005 and 2022. And so you can see there's a pretty good number, right, of awardees. And about 80% went on to apply for an R level grant with almost a 70 or 65 to 70% success rate, right? That is awesome. And most people who applied, the majority of people, obtain at least one subsequent award. So I think the message is that if you can get a K and you want to continue on in research, you're going to be able to get an R. Now, I don't have data here on how many times people had to apply, but I think and I also don't have data on how many people got a second R01, which I think had become increasingly more important to have, and I think those are data that would be interesting to capture. But I think in general, the data are really encouraging, right? If you get a K and you want to move on in research, you have a great chance of getting an R. Now, we often get the question, well, should I get an R01 or should I go after an R21 or a smaller grant? And I think there is absolutely a place for getting an R21. There are projects and science and ideas that lend themselves beautifully to that mechanism, but I don't want it to be where people will call us and be like, well, I don't know, it's really intimidating, like an R01, it just seems so lofty, I'm just gonna try for this smaller grant because I think it'll be easier to get. And that's not really a good reason, I think, to go after the smaller grant because it's going to be easier to get, because if you look at our data, at least for NINDS, the success rate shown in yellow for R01s is quite a bit higher than that of those who went after the R21. So if the R21 makes sense for the project that you're doing, absolutely go after it, but don't be afraid of the R01, right? Don't be intimidated. If that's the path forward, the next best step for your work and your career, don't be afraid to go after it. Okay, some things to think about. One of the things I like to always say is that when you're writing your grant and you're putting it together, just anticipate the questions that are going to come up, because I've sat through too many review meetings, and I think anyone here that's been on a study section or that has sat in on review knows that if your reviewers, they're reading your application, they're probably crammed in the back of a plane with like screaming babies and the Lord knows what else is going on. And they're reading your application, and you really want them to be, overjoyed with what they're reading and really excited about it. And they may be, but if they're going along and they come to a question that they can't answer, they can't find the information in the application, that becomes frustrating. And they come to the review meeting, they sit down in the study section and they say, I love the candidate, I love the work, the mentor is great, the career development plan is awesome, but I have this question that's really bothering me and I don't know, I can't find the answer. Did anyone else see this information? And other people will be, scrolling through the application and saying, well, I don't see this either. And now that you mentioned that, here are 6 other things that I am starting to question. And 20 minutes later, they've talked the score down from something that was, we love everything about this, to now, I don't know if this is gonna be able to go forward. So the moral of the story there is you gotta fill those gaps. Don't let them ask questions. Don't assume they know anything or know everything, right? Assume that they don't know, and really spoon feed the information so that it's very clear exactly what you're trying to convey. So consider the questions that might come up as you're working on your application and try to fill those gaps. Have people read your application, have your friends, your fans, your people who don't believe in what you're doing, because they're gonna probably give you some nice reality check. But that will help you to identify where those gaps might be in and give you the chance to fill them in, so that reviewers don't write their, make up their own story as to what is going on in your application. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this thing. Steve Korn and I were talking a couple years ago about, are there patterns and things that go wrong in review? And we were specifically at that time talking about people that are transitioning from NINDS-K awards to like applying for an RO1. So we were like, well, let's look at some summary statements. Actually, first we weren't like that. First we were like, let's talk to Adam Hartman. Adam, what do you think are some commonly cited weaknesses that you see in RO1 applications coming from K awardees? And he told us this list here in black. Overconfidence in the science of preliminary data, skipping on pitfalls and alternatives. I see this all the time in applications I read. The pitfalls and alternatives are like, it's just gonna work, period. Next topic. And limited team, right? You have a team assembled, but maybe there's someone else you need to achieve the goals that you've laid out in the project, and you don't have the appropriate collaborator or mentor to be able to help you do that. It's overly ambitious. You have 15 years of work proposed, and for a 5-year grant. Budgets that are unrealistic. You're proposing to do a whole bunch of stuff, and you're just like, but like that's going to be way more expensive than the money that you're going to get on an RO1. How are they going to pay for this? So Steve and I, though, decided that we were going to actually look at summary statements from these applications from K awardees who applied for RO1s. And so he took a pile of like K08s, I took some K23s, and we started looking, and we're thinking we're gonna find all sorts of interesting things. But what we saw were, time and again, these applications were riddled with problems with scientific rigor. And I don't mean rigor in the NIH sense of the word rigor. I mean experimental design, approach, analysis plan, statistics, you name it, there were problems. So here are comments from an actual summary statement. I hope it's not from anyone here, but it's redacted, so I don't know who it's from, but I pulled these out. And you can see the first bullet, this is the same summary statement. The committee loved this. They loved the work, it's innovative, it's game-changing, the investigator is outstanding. But then you see the however comma, and it's about to go into a very different space. There were some issues with experimental design, appropriate dose selection, age selection, appropriate use of controls. And all of this ends with this last sentence, that the weaknesses really were deemed minor to moderate in the approach, right? And if you are accumulating moderate weaknesses, your score is gonna go right down. And so this is a problem. And it can be a serious problem, right? It can be a kiss of death through application. So you can see all these are all comments from summary statements. There were sample size calculation problems all the way to this third bullet from the bottom. Hypothesis is unfalsifiable based on the proposed methods. I'm sure none of you are gonna have this issue, but this is really a problem, right? That's a fatal flaw. So they're bad problems that can definitely take the whole application down, but they're preventable. And I think everyone in this room is probably doing the right thing by developing expertise in scientific method and experimental design, understanding and not just plugging and playing various statistical analyses plans or approaches, but really understanding and thinking about them and applying them appropriately and doing all the right rigorous things for your science, not just so you can get your application funded, right, but because the science needs to be sound. So that, I think I just wanted to drive home that these rigor issues are all over the place. They were by far the thing we saw the most, and they're really preventable, so do your part and do solid science. And so I would say, do scientifically impeccable work, right, for the sake of the science and where the science is going to end up. Do work that's important and do something that you love to do, because that's what's going to keep you going through times like now when things are a bit uncertain. All right, so moving over to just talking a little bit before we wrap up about the actual K award or a K application or any career development application really, but in NIH. you know, there's the science, and we spend a lot of time talking about the science and really developing that perfect specific aims page and really thinking deeply about how to write up the research. And that is obviously a very, very important component of the application, but for career development awards, that's just one piece of the pie, right? Your score is gonna be really a composite. It's gonna be looking holistically at your research, your career development plan, your mentoring plan, and the individuals that you've brought along to help you get where you're trying to go, as well as the institutional commitment, the time that you're gonna have to dedicate to this. All of this is gonna be taken into account. So I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking about some of the things to pay attention to, at least from our perspective at NINDS, when preparing some of these other aspects of the application. So first, the career development plan. So this is a plan really about you sitting down and saying, here I am, I'm gonna ask for funding for an additional period of mentored career development. And this is where I'm trying to go. I wanna get all the way over there to be independent, to submit my R01, to start my own research program. And between here and there, here are the things, the gaps that I need to fill in my, you know, sort of portfolio, so to speak, or my toolbox. And you want to be able to then identify what those gaps are. What are the needs? What strengths what do you need to develop? What skills do you need to gain, etc. And then have a plan, which is your career development plan, for how you're going to fill those gaps. So generally, the career development plan, individual reviewers, and I think NIH, we like to see it be gap-based. See that you've identified those gaps and said, if I can fill these gaps, and here's how I'm going to fill them, I'm going to be able to get there and start my own independent career. And the gaps can be things like techniques that you might want to learn, content that you might need to gain, skills, specific types of mentorship. There's no formula for this, and there's no correct amount of career development activities that you may do. People always want to know, do I need courses? Or I'm going to throw a course in here because I feel like they're going to want to see a course. I mean, you don't need courses unless you need courses, and then you need them, and make sure that you put them on there. It shouldn't be overly ambitious because you want to still have time to do the research, right? And it shouldn't include unnecessary skill building or unnecessary coursework. It really has to be specifically tailored to you and your needs. So your needs, your research, I think it can be useful to look at someone else's career development plan and see sort of how they formatted it, what kinds of things they may have put on that plan that, like, because you might be like, oh, that could be something that would be useful for me, or an approach that I could take to fill a gap that I have. But copying it or sort of reproducing it sort of without making it specific for you is going to be a problem, right? Reviewers are going to see through that. Because I think in a lot of ways your career development plan is very much tied to the science you're doing, right? You're doing this kind of science that's maybe at some intersection of neurology and immunology, and you're a neuro person, you need to get immunology skills, right? Like, that's unique to you. So how are you going to get those skills and tell the reviewers how that's going to happen? And also for yourself, right? So that you can be successful. So once you have what you need, I can't stress enough to justify this really, really well. Reviewers need to know that you've been thoughtful about this, as you have a clear plan to get where you're trying to go. So ask, what training do I need? Why do I need it? And how am I going to get it? And explain that all very sort of clearly for the reviewers. And remember that some of these reviewers are going to be squarely in your scientific area, and others are going to be experts in other spaces. So you want it to appeal to all of these individuals, and you want them to all read it and be like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I might not understand every nuance of it, but this is clear. Like, this is what they're telling you they need. This is how they're going to get it. I think this is going to work. So some typical comments that come up in review around the career development plan are that it's not gap-based, right? You need to identify what those weaknesses are and how you're going to fill them. It's generic. It's just, I'm going to take a grant writing course, I'm going to go to the AAN meeting, and I'm going to publish 2 manuscripts a year. Right? Any of us could write that. And it's not specific. I think those are all great, wonderful things, but also tell me some things that are specific to you and that are really going to help you get over that hurdle to independence. There's too much. They just are doing every course, and they are doing all the things, and they're going and spending 6 months in this other lab learning this technique. When are you going to do the research, right? So it has to be feasible and balanced. There's unnecessary coursework. There's an item that you've included that's not necessary for you. This happens a lot where you'll hear that someone is saying, well, I'm going to take, a statistics class, but you've already been showed that you have lots of, experience in that space. Or I need to go learn how to do some electrophysiology technique. I'm talking very basic science yet, I apologize. So wrong examples for this audience, but I need to learn these, I'm gonna go learn these electrophysiology techniques, but like you were doing that, you know, in grad school or something. And reviewers will point that out, like why are they saying they need this when they already seem to have this skill, or they've already published a paper in this space? So that you'll see something like that. You'll always see you need more statistics, or they don't need statistics. Why are they saying they need a stat scores, or they need statistical experience when they already have it? There will be this sort of need fill in the blank, right? They need help in some content area or more experience in some space, and they haven't given a plan. Sometimes people will say, I need to develop skills in this area, and not give a plan for how they're gonna get it. And again, sometimes it's just not clear from what they're saying, like I need these to develop these skills. How is what you put on paper actually going to translate into getting those skills? And sometimes reviewers are confused with that. So these are all things I think that are quite avoidable. All right, so now we'll talk just for a few minutes about this mentoring business, because there has to be a mentoring plan as a part of your application, and we get lots of questions around this. The first question we always get is like, how many mentors do I need, right? Obviously there's a primary mentor, but then it's like, well, how many? And the answer is you need the right number for you. And whatever that is, right, if you're like, this is a team of people that I need to assemble, and it makes sense for you and it's gonna help you get to independence or get through this project, if you can just explain that and articulate to reviewers, like here are all the people that I have selected as my mentors, and here's what they're going to do, the role they're going to play, and why they are the best people to do this, reviewers are gonna buy it. I mean, you don't want 50 people, but you know, if you have a reasonable plan that makes sense to them, it's whatever that number is that's right for you and what you need. So you need somebody that's gonna cover technical expertise for you, that's gonna cover certain knowledge that you may have or knowledge gaps. We're gonna need people that have successfully navigated, if you're a clinician scientist career, or whatever career path it is that you're trying to navigate. And it can also be good, even if you are a clinician, to have a PhD mentor, because they are gonna give a little bit of a different perspective and might be able to help in spaces that a pure clinician may not. But I think overall, and we said this earlier, is you need people that are gonna be there for you, that are gonna have time, that are gonna take the time, that are gonna make the time to read that AIMS page, that are gonna take the time to meet with you and to talk to you and to really help you find your way forward. So in the actual application, you're gonna have to write a plan for who these people are, who are these mentors, describe their role, and how you're gonna interact with them, right? What is the nature of the interactions, what is the frequency of the interactions, and what do you expect to gain from this? And then sort of concurrently, your mentor, the primary mentor generally, is going to have to write a plan for interacting with you as well. So they need to write what they're gonna do for you, and they need to say, like, this is what I'm going to provide and how I'm going to help this individual. And these two like plans really need to line up. I've definitely seen applications, and I'm sure other people who have reviewed have seen these too, where the mentoring plan will say one thing, and like from the mentor, and the plan that the candidate has written up says something different, right? I'm gonna meet with my mentor every week, and we're gonna have these great discussions, and then the mentor's like, well, I'm gonna talk to them every, quarter. And I mean, this has happened, and you're just like, something's not right here, and it feels like you're not even communicating with your mentor, and then if the mentor's not even on board and helping you get through this application, and you're not on the same page, reviewers are gonna say, well, how are they gonna help them and be on the same page with them through their research? And so that's kind of always a red flag that you want to avoid. If you have multiple mentors and they're gonna need to interact with each other, you're gonna need to describe how that's gonna happen and what the benefit of that is gonna be for you. And really all of this needs to make sense, and it needs to be feasible, and it needs to be something that any person that reads it says, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, they're gonna have time to do this, they have the right set of people, they're meeting at the right frequency, they're covering the right bases to help this person be successful. I think really the take-home message with any of these grants is just make it make sense for people. So I would say don't write your mentor statement and don't write your reference letters. I think it can be useful to give a mentor information to help them write something, but if reviewers will pick it up very quickly that you've written the mentor statement, and if your mentor can't take the time to write a mentor statement, they're gonna again question if they can take time to actually mentor you. Certainly have your mentor and others read snippets of the best quality draft that you have often, and it will help you to iterate and make this application and what you're writing better and better each time you look back at it. So give yourself plenty of time, basically. Here are the top 100 reviewer comments about mentorship coming from, this is a Steve Korn special. It's hard to imagine that a mentor read this application is absolutely the #1 comment, and then all the way down the top 100, it's again, it's hard to imagine that a mentor read this application. So please have your mentor read the application. Just like, this is the most unavoidable, this is the most avoidable comment, and we hate to see it. Other comments you see is that the mentoring plan is generic. This is the very worst case of this that I've seen. I don't think I've ever seen the 2K awards, but I've seen 2 fellowship applications come in from the same lab for 2 different students or postdocs, and they'll have an identical plan, right? Like, there can be things where there's overlap, but these are 2 different people with different needs. So the mentoring plan can't be generic, just like the career development plan can be. The training plan is not tailored to the applicant. Again, that goes along with this generic business. There's not enough detail. It's thin is the word you'll often see. It's not clear what the role of this mentor is. Why do we have this mentor on here? No one told me what they're gonna do. The applicant needs a mentor for something, and they don't seem to have someone with that expertise or with that know-how. The mentor and the applicant are not on the same page. We already talked about that. And the mentor doesn't have funding. We talked about that a little bit this morning. I think you just need to make sure that somebody has funds to help you be successful, and that you're gonna be able to carry out this project with the appropriate support, even if it's not the primary mentor. Okay, so wrapping up, there's lots of other parts of the application: institutional commitment, you as a candidate, your record, your experience, and of course the research. But we'll leave that for another day. Happy to talk offline about any of this, especially the institutional commitment. I put here that we can share these slides. These are links to our KOA and K23 pages. There's lots of useful information on these pages and links to documents. I think there's a document we made about how to write a good career development plan. So I would encourage you to take a look at those. A couple of other odds and ends. I just have to plug the loan repayment program, which is still going. This is anybody that's doing 20 hours of research a week can apply for this, and you can get up to $50,000 a year to repay educational debt. For NINDS, if you are already funded, especially if you're a clinician and you're already funded by some other mechanism, or participating in something like this, and you put that in your application, you have a really, really high likelihood of getting funded, because we like to keep supporting the people we're already supporting. I want to also mention this NINDS KO2 Independent Scientist Award. I hope that we are able to keep this going as things are changing with how many different programs we're allowed to have. But this is a nice mechanism that often follows a KO8 and a K23. This is NINDS specific. There are other KO2s around the rest of NIH. This is very specific to NINDS, this iteration. But for someone who is like, well, I'm not quite ready for an R01, I need a little bit more mentored time to fill in some gaps. For this, you would get salaried research costs for the first 3 years of this K, and then the last 2 would be contingent on successful competition for an R01. So you kind of have to know that you're coming up on that R and you're almost ready, but you still aren't quite ready yet. And this works. We don't fund a lot of these, but for the people that we do, I think it's really helpful. And then finally, I want to plug the Building Up the Nerve podcast. This is produced by a couple of individuals who are now in my lab, who were my office, and were previously in a different office, but this is a great sort of one-stop shop with lots of information related to applying for NIH funding and just building research careers. So with that, I will thank you for your time. I don't know why thank you isn't showing up, but we got a nice graphic. With that, I'll be around to answer any questions.